Welcome back, everyone. We are going to start the next session of IAFOR, and it is of AGen, and it is a panel session where we will discuss resilience and our ability to respond to changing dynamics due to COVID. And let me go to the intro here real quick. Yep. This is I apologize. I thought I had this right here on my notes, but apparently I don't. But that's okay. Let me go to my other notes. Very good. Well, welcome back. This session is a panel discussion talking about creating a new normal, responding and adapting and thriving in a post-COVID-19 world. The COVID-19 pandemic has impacted almost every aspect of our life worldwide. And as we have recently passed the one-year anniversary, there are indications that we can begin to see a way forward, where the impacts of COVID-19 are better understood. This panel brings together the leaders of the various conferences that are being held under the IAFOR umbrella this week. There's myself, a gerontologist who is interested in everything aging. We also have with us Dr. Dexter Silva, who is a psychologist, and he is one of the leaders of the psychology meeting, and Dr. Monty Satiadarma, who is also a psychologist and a leading expert in a number of psychological issues, but also he has many interesting things to say about morality and ethics. So we're just going to talk casually for the next bit about the way COVID has impacted society and how we see ourselves moving forward from each of our own disciplines. I'll start as a gerontologist. I have spent the last year simply being devastated and angry and outraged. I have lost so many of my old people for absolutely foolish and totally predictable reasons. I've seen families devastated. I've seen elderly isolated. Even on a personal level, my wife and I invested a large amount of time keeping my daughter's godmother safe from COVID because she's very frail. And unfortunately, she had to go to the hospital, and inevitably, she got COVID. We were lucky in that she survived the experience, but it's just an example of no matter how hard you work as a family, things can still happen, and our elders have been endangered. But I was looking at some statistics the other day, and one of the things I noticed was that we've had over 119 million cases of COVID worldwide. Huge number, devastating number. In the United States, we've added an additional million to our mortality for the year. The first time this has happened in decades. Normally, the United States will routinely experience about 2 million deaths a year. This year, we'll be approaching 3 million. It's just unusual. There's also been over 2,600,000 deaths from COVID worldwide. Both these numbers are disturbing. Both of these numbers are very upsetting. But I looked at the other number, and almost 95 million people successfully recovered from COVID. And that is something that I can draw a little bit of hope from, that while this has been a pandemic of immense proportions and has hurt so many people through the loss of family members, by and large, people survive. They move forward. They continue their lives. The vast majority of people who have COVID have survived it. And hopefully we can do things to make this better for them. As a gerontologist, we're seeing significant progress, finally, significant progress. Never in my life have I seen an effective vaccine produced as quickly as we produced the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines. Just overwhelming praise for the clinical scientists and the physicians who developed this vaccine. It works, and it's going out finally to our elders, and our elders are being protected. And now I'm starting to see reunions, wonderful reunions between elderly people who haven't seen their children or their grandchildren in over a year. And it's life embracing when you see a young child run to a grandmother that they've missed and they haven't been able to hold or hug. And we have a long way to go. I mean, in the United States and I believe in Europe, there's been a serious problem with terrible assaults on Asian elders because of the stupidity of blaming Asians for the COVID-19 virus. WHO was doing simulations in 1917 and 18, and they were using Latin America as a place they thought would be the origin of the next COVID pandemic. It just happened to come out of China. And the changes in travel, the changes in border controls all contributed, and a lot of bad policy, a lot of stupidity. But we're learning. We're increasingly discovering ways to protect our elders, particularly in nursing homes, particularly in institutional settings where there's the greatest danger of transmission. Getting everyone vaccinated is the first step. That cuts the transmission of the virus off. And I'm hoping that all of this loss will reinforce the importance of family, the importance of advocating and embracing the elders, because you can lose them so quickly and so easily and in such great numbers. In the United States, most of the elders who died could not be buried in a religious service or with family present because of the infection. We still have mass graves in New York City and other places filled with people who have yet to be claimed, who died of this terrible, terrible disease. But it does show the frailty of life and how elders need advocacy, how elders have to have someone there to speak for them, and that if you miss the opportunity to be part of their lives, then you will suffer. A lot of my work outside of just data and research is closure issues. People who have not sufficiently bonded or who feel guilt about the way they interacted with their elders before they died. And at that point, it's always too late. You always have to do what you can. You don't have to do everything, but you do what you can to make their lives good, to be a part of their lives. We see a lot of work ahead of us dealing with loneliness and depression and anxiety among elders. And a lot of people are just scared. And I'm hoping getting some control of the virus through vaccination will help us do that. We will have ups and downs. These variants are already challenging the vaccinations that are available. We don't know if they will work. We don't know if we'll have another wave. But we've got a handle on it. And that gives me a tremendous amount of hope as a gerontologist that we'll be able to better protect our elders in the future and that we'll be better prepared. We knew this could happen. I had talked about a pandemic over a decade ago at a meeting in Asia, and everyone, they didn't want to talk about it, but we knew this could happen. The avian flu could have been much worse than it was if the Chinese government hadn't taken such exceptional steps in controlling the spread of the virus. The possibility is always there, but I'm hopeful now. A lot of The rage is gone. There's still a lot of sorrow and a lot of work to be done to rebuild lives, but there is hope in the future. And I think the elderly will benefit. And I hope we learn lessons from what we failed to do for our elders out of fear. And I'll talk a little bit about that later in another session, how we failed. But today I want to focus on successes. And Dr. De Silva, if you wanted to offer some thoughts from your conference's perspective.
Yes. Thank you. James. First, I guess I want to say thank you for asking me to join this conversation, because I didn't think about it until you asked, but it's really a great idea to share our perspectives coming out of these different conferences happening at the same time, to build on them. And one thing I want to respond now, one thing I would like to respond right now is, I'm sorry? Okay. Is the word that you used a few times and right at the end, hope. So I'll start and say, that's for me one of the most important things for a post-COVID society, is a positive feeling of hope and optimism. I'll say a few other things now, but the last thing I'll focus on is about this sort of positive emotion based on positive psychology, but for a post-COVID world, the importance of that sort of optimism and hope for everyone, for the leaders, for everybody. I also want to kind of respond to what you said based on my own experience about just the sadness and needlessness of so much death and tragedy. And different countries have handled this in different ways. And we've had some really successful countries. And for example, New Zealand is often touted as the most successful, and I think we can learn from their leadership, Jacinda's leadership for the future. But I think we need to not forget the suffering that you've mentioned. One of the common experiences I've had is people in Japan, a lot of non-Japanese people in Japan who have not been able to attend their parents' or families' funerals, and it's been really heartbreaking for a lot of people. What I had probably the most important woman or person apart from my family, the most important woman in my life died last year, and because of travel restrictions, I couldn't go to the funeral. But I was able to attend a virtual service, and I was actually really surprised at how cathartic and how powerful it was, just virtually. And how important it was. And I know some people whose parents died, or mother died, different people, and couldn't do that, and couldn't even attend a virtual one or online streamed funeral, and they still have some kind of regret or sadness just about that. So I think that's something that we can learn also for the future, that virtual events, including funerals, are really useful, really positive and we can continue. But that's another thing that I'm kind of responding to your what you talked about. But I'll just switch gears a little bit here and go to my first, based on the conferences, language conference and the psychology conference, the perspectives for kind of a post-COVID world. And one is, there was a panel on language and looking at kind of a fairly new area, a new peace linguistics. So peace linguistics has been around for a while, but it's kind of a new way of looking at it systematically, and there I think we kind of talked about the importance of language, the power of language to hurt, to heal, even virtually, the importance, the creativity, the richness, the kind of real importance of language. And I think the more we recognize that and kind of use that in our dealings with people, from sort of like colleagues and friends, but in holding our leaders responsible to the language they use in this sort of new normal or post-COVID world, I think really trying to learn from, like you mentioned about the older Asian problems. I think a lot of that has come from language. Language in the media, language by people in power, language. So just kind of focusing and recognizing the importance of language for positive and avoiding hurt and pain. The second, from the psychology conference aspect, and especially my main area is educational psychology. Tomorrow, Andrew Martin will give a keynote on adaptability, and specifically about looking at this sort of COVID and post-COVID world, and his concept of adaptability is very similar to resilience, the idea of resilience, but a bit more specific. And I'll just actually read a definition he has of adaptability, that from an earlier paper he's written. He says, he wrote, adaptability is defined as appropriate cognitive, behavioral, and or affective adjustment in the face of uncertainty and novelty. So I think that idea is really important for the future during the pandemic, but also post that idea. And I'll let people who are interested in that, they can watch his keynote tomorrow to hear it from the horse's mouth. And then the other third thing that came out, not directly from any presentations or panels discussions, but from my own interest in the idea of trust as a kind of social intelligence, and this idea of trust actually was the theme of ACP conference 10 years ago in Osaka. And I continue to always think that it just runs through so much of what we do. But the idea of, again, understanding who to trust, how to trust, when to trust. And so especially, for example, in a COVID and post-COVID world, we need to trust the scientists. And we need to trust that knowledge. And yeah, we need to trust politicians with other things. that in terms of the basic, not just COVID, but also, climate change and all of these really deep problems facing the world, we need to kind of learn how to trust better, how to trust, who to trust with what, a bit, and be more aware of that, and the importance of trusting the right people at the right time in the right way. And I have the kind of concept. It's not my concept, but I use it a lot, of authentic trust, meaning that it's not a naive trust or a blind trust. It's a kind of a active, knowing, conscious way of trusting as a verb, not as a noun. So those are sort of my the things that come out of the conference over the past few days. I can talk a little bit more, but based on kind of what I just, these kind of journals, psychology journals, which I just looked at the last couple of days, the kind of issues that came up with them, but maybe too much, and they might come up in our discussion. But the last thing I'll just say is on the APA, American Psychological Association website, there's kind of a new kind of weekly podcast. And I think, again, this is a way of not dispersing, but providing access to information, to knowledge, to experience, to ideas easily, not on paper, but available to everybody. It's through this podcast. And it's by the father of positive psychology, Martin Seligman, who talks about this hope idea. And his one of his main ideas is that helplessness, the feeling of helplessness or hopelessness, is actually our human default position. As babies, as the kids, we are helpless, and a lot depends on nurturing or developing a kind of optimism and hopefulness, and that the idea of optimism and hopefulness is really critical in terms of leaders being optimistic, hopeful, in a post-COVID world, more productive, and they are kind of better leaders. So someone like a Jacinda, I can't remember her last name now, but she's maybe a good example of this idea of a productive, hopeful, positive leader, and then trying to share that with everybody on different levels, in the schools, in the among the politicians and everything. And he also says that kind of during the pandemic, what is really kind of useful on a daily level, on a personal level, is not so much thinking about future optimism for the future, but current feeling of happiness, dancing, and even like on Zoom virtually, trying to share positivity. And I think this is something that's kind of come up and people are quite aware of now, is that people are living alone, especially elderly people. There are a lot of people living alone and who are having mental health issues, and the need to kind of connect with them regularly. And connecting is not just a 5-minute phone call, but actually spending 15, 20 minutes talking, even if it's virtually. That's so important to kind of keep them feeling and doing something positive, joking and making sure it's a positive experience, not complaining about the weather. And that he thinks that's really important for actually not getting sick, not catching COVID. That sort of positivity is one of actually helps people be more resilient to but that's during COVID. That post-COVID world, the future is much more about hope and optimism, and developing that, not seeing that as a characteristic that's set in people, but that it's something that can be developed through different kind of practices and communication. So that's my.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Dexter.
Okay.
This is really very nice discussion. Dr. Satiadarma, Monty.
Yes, James.
Over the years, I've watched you tie together at the end of a conference all of the disparate strings of all the things that have been talked about over 3 days. And I'm hoping you can do something similar for this panel discussion and offer your insights as well.
Okay. Well, first of all, I would like to thank you for inviting me in this panel discussion. And you asked me also to talk about racialism and so forth that is happening in America. That was the time I was, like I said, a little bit shocked. What happened in America? Racialism, what? I didn't hear anything from my sisters in America. And then I started to browse the YouTube and so forth and the CNN and everything. Well, but first of all, I want to give response to you and Dexter talking about hope. I think hope is a form of positive thinking. We have to keep of having hope, not only in the pandemic situation, but every time. And I believe hope is a form of prayer in silence. It's a not silence prayer, but prayer in silence is a form of that is hope. And talking about losing someone, to be honest, I just lost my mom last year. She died because of stroke, but because of the condition of the COVID and pandemic situation, I couldn't visit her in a hospital. Once she was in a hospital, she was in the ICU. I couldn't visit her, and then then I had to wait outside until she was cremated, and then so I was not on her bedside. Okay, so and no virtual. Luckily, I still could throw her ashes into the ocean, right? And then responding about peace linguistics. Now, this is what I want to discuss a little bit, quoting my professor in the University of Indonesia on his dissertation long time ago in Toronto University. He was talking about the two we-ness in Indonesia. We-ness, kita, and kami. The kita means I and you. That is accepting the diversity. Whereas the kami is I and my other friend, plural forms, but you are not included. So accepting only similarity, we don't accept the diversity. Now, the challenge is there has always been, have always been rebellions to separate or unwillingness to accept kita and the unwillingness to accept the diversity. Instead, people are looking for the kami. People are looking for the other we-ness, the only I and my community we-ness. And this issue has been increased in America lately because of the primarily physical identity. There have been lots of Chinese American, Chinese who's born in America, and they don't feel American, they don't feel Chinese anymore. They speak American, but because of their physical outlook, physical performance, they're considered as a foreigner. This is related to what developmental psychologist once mentioned. He was Erik Erikson, talking about pseudospecies, and people are talking about pseudospecies to fight for the supremacy, to fight for the superiority of one group over another as a form of compensation of inferior feelings, and then becoming anxious of being defeated or surpassed, and so they conduct oppression. This is not only in America. This is not only in Europe. This happens all over the world. This happens in Asia. This happens in Indonesia, and in accordance to the psychoanalytical, probably they are using intellectualization. They are trying to use intellectualization. Sometimes they are using rationalization in order um, to support their their opinion. Now the problem is this is not only during the COVID, but racialism has been going for a long time. We have to look for the history. For example, in America, it's the history from the railroad, from the Chinese coming to America. In Indonesia, also there are some conditions like that, and for the uh, competitiveness of business between the Chinese and the non-Chinese, the natives and the Chinese, and then also in the Palestines, in the Middle East, that happens things like that. Now, but the problem is how people implement such kind of things, such kind of destructiveness in the time, and especially in the time that people are supposed to get adjusted, supposed to get adaptive, and supposed to trust in a form of social intellectual. We have to trust the scientists, as Dexter said. But there are some people who don't want to trust the scientists because of their ethnicity, and they don't want to trust the medicines because of their ethnicity, and probably because of nation. They implement the form of systematic destruction, diversity, including they destruct the diversity for 4 pillars of education: to know, to do, to be, and to live together. But how? They institutionalize knowing others incorrectly through incorrect education and hoaxing. This is what they have been doing. And internet, Zoom, or whatever, they're using this kind of communication for incorrect education and hoaxing. And then also they also internalize into the belief system by being prejudiced to others, and then being racialist based on the Puritanism. We are the purest nation. We are the purest ethnic. We are the purest beings probably in the universe. And then they are also doing destructive to others by violent aggression. And this is a proof of act of superiority, because we are the purest, we are the most intellectual, we are the most intelligent, we are the most acceptable nation or ethnic. And then they are unwilling and preventing to live together. They are rejecting the kita. They are rejecting the KITA, the kita, the INU, and they are enforcing the kami, only I and my community. This has been happening over and over and over again, and then the issue of COVID and Corona has increased, escalates the condition even more, because people are in personal distancing. We are having problems for gathering in Tokyo. We are having problems in gathering in Kobe. And how do we spend our longingness one another? Very difficult. We have to find the time to look for the Zoom platform or or other platform. So I think we have to resolve in this. We have to resolve this kind of condition, considering the education, considering the institutionalization and the belief system, the act of superiority. Now we, through education, we need to deliver the correct information, and by increasing tolerance. We need to increase the tolerance, um, telling people the correct information, and then through social media by censoring the negative propaganda on ethnicity and racialism. And sometimes news media, they create by sending the news, by viraling the news, by publishing the news, that increase the ethnicity, that increase the racialism, without positive comments on what exactly that we have to do, what exactly the correct information is. And then through legal law action by preventing the violent aggression. Now law has to very strong to prevent violent aggression. There are lots of unbalances also in the humanitarian act. There are lots of aggression conducted by some people, some community, um, being free, and then people who are victimized even get a negative impact from that. They don't really care. There are lots of victimized people feeling uncared by the law, and there are lots of oppressors feeling safe, even safe doing here and there, even safe doing aggression in many areas of the world now. So the legal and law supposed to be very strong on dealing with this. And of course, I want to uh, talk a little bit about IAFOR. This is actually a very good community through exchanging perspective by integrating cross-cultural concepts, ideas. I cannot forget, of course, the what Stuart Picken implemented at the very beginning of the IAFOR. Professor Picken considered about acceptance, the cross-cultural concept, cross-cultural disciplines, that we live from different perspective. We have to respect one another from based on our different perspective, our differences, our diversities. That is the concept of actually kita. That is the concept of INU. And I'm hoping that IAFOR has been doing and so to continue expanding the issues and topic, including diversities. And this is, we have the platform, we have the community that allow us to discuss more about these diversities, allow us to discuss more about the possibilities to create the kita, to create the INU we-ness. Although I cannot deny that this kind of let's say ethnic conflict, racialism may always be there. There are lots of disagreement on perspective, disagreement on politics, people having different idealism. But what we have to really concern is the correct information about the perspective, the basic perspective. So there is no hoaxing here and there and people cheating. There are lots of lies. There are lots of conflict based on lies report. It's just like the conflict in Paris, killing of the school teacher in Paris, based on lies, and we still don't know what is the action of legal conduct in Paris on that. I believe that, and hopefully that IAFOR remains strong with this intergroup activity, interdisciplinary activity, and cross-cultural condition. I give it back to you, James. That's it.
You're muted, James. James, we can't hear you.
Oh, there we go. I'm muted. Okay. First of all, we want to encourage anyone who would like to contribute to this discussion to put their thoughts in the chat box. We're all going through circumstances of despair, and hopefully we can see hope in the future. And you're welcome to share on this. On a broad issue, one of the things that concerns me is how do we re-socialize ourselves in terms of education, in terms of interactions. My work building has been closed for over a year now, and almost all of my work is done exclusively over these kinds of forums. And I lose so much context. I mean, you cannot see me nervously playing with my pen as I talk because we're not face to face. We learn to have this Zoom face that gives away nothing, and we lose out on all the body language that tells us about anxieties and nervousness and fear. And also the students who haven't been in a classroom situation, who have been able to, I don't know, put up a picture of themselves on their Zoom marker and then go lay down in bed. And there's a lot of loss, even at IAFOR. I really have to say I miss the after talk discussions, just sitting around with the students and the faculty and the other researchers and just chatting about things. It's just one of the things I love about IAFOR and in conferences in general. And I hope we can recapture that. But I do fear that we'll have to relearn interaction skills. And if you guys would like to contribute to that, that would be wonderful as well.
Yeah. Okay, that's I like that word you just used, re-socialize ourselves. I think it's so true. We actually don't know how important it is and what we used to do until you've lost it. Yeah, that old expression, you don't realize what you've got until it's gone. My own experience of re-socializing was when my university decided to go online. Most people started working at home. Some universities in Tokyo closed completely, so you had to work at home. My university, where it is, it's sort of in the suburbs, and so and no high tall buildings, closed space, so open spaces and stuff. But I didn't come onto campus for about 3 weeks. And I started feeling like I was ready to retire. I started feeling partly because, this was all new. Teaching online was new. I didn't feel competent. And I think this is, this feeling of mastery or competence is important part of our re-socializing, to really have a kind of a positive relationship with other people. I think you really got to feel, kind of self-competent and self-confident. So I started feeling, I can't do this. I'm not teaching as well as I could or I want to, because of technology, because of not being, in personal contact with the students. And then the lack of movement in my body, I wasn't moving around a lot. So that also is contributing. And I went through a kind of initial stages of depression.
Mm-hmm.
And I walked to campus after about 3 weeks. I decided I'll teach online from my office, not from home. And as soon as I arrived, I heard another teacher's voice. And I thought, wow, it wasn't just the voice. I could hear the voice on Zoom, but it was the voice, the echo of the voice in this context, in this space, my office and the corridor and the building. And it was like, I'm back. Immediately, you know, and so for me, the socialization is this sort of your confidence or feeling of competence, feeling that, you know, you have something to contribute to the relationship. But the context in which it happens, I realized I need to be in this space, my office or in the classroom or whatever. And that space provides me with a part of my identity, part
Yes,
of my community.
that's the word I was thinking of, identity.
Yeah, yeah. And so, you know, from, you know, it from my own experience, you know, this was really, and I realized, okay, these things I've lost, these specific things, you know, actually moving my body to a different space, actually hearing other people's voices, my colleagues, they provide part of my social identity, my academic identity. Um, and, you know, the books around me, my own space, that's different to my home. It's so, you know, I really think it's a good word to think about, re-socializing ourselves. It might be seen as being simple, and just um, you know, getting
Absolutely.
used to other people again or touching again, or but it's much more than that. It's really powerful. I completely agree with you, James. Mm.
Yes, I
Monty,
think
yeah,
uh,
bring us home.
within a short period of time, because of this situation, we've been losing a part of our characters. We've been losing quite a big part of our characters, which is as a social animal, which is social being. Our social being has been taken off, although we still can socialize through the social media platform, but it is very different than direct interaction. We lose our interactiveness, and even that uh, later on, after we return to socialize, we have to really be careful on the what we call it the new normal, because of the also because of the publication of the propaganda of the non-symptomatic people. You don't really know who's symptomatic, and how are you going to be contaminated. Now, I've been observing several people in my homeland in Indonesia. They are, let's say, they're in a below poverty line, because they don't even use masks. They cannot provide themselves with buying masks, because rather than buying masks, they would rather buy food. And then they live very close, in a very congested place of living, and there is no report of any death in that area. There is no report of that COVID death. It may not be recorded because people don't really care about that. The government don't really pay much attention about that. But some of them are trash can people. They collect trash. They still around. Some of them around my house, collecting garbage and so forth. They don't use masks. They still healthy. We don't really know who's healthy and who's not later on. And then of course we have to maintain our health. Um, this is not only during the COVID and Corona symptoms. We have to maintain our health every day. Okay? And like that, what Dexter said, it's I see this as like a home and away. The campus is our home, partially our home, and suddenly we are away from our home. We are away from our culture. We are away from our environment, and we are taken out from our environment. We are prevented, disallowed to go there, prohibited to go there, and then this is a transitional period, and then we get back again to our environment. We return to our, then we have to be in a transitional period again. So we've been in a period of transition and transition and transition from 1 month to another. This is a little bit better probably because I haven't heard any more reports as a few months in the earlier condition of COVID prohibition. There are people who are suddenly having delusional because of being alone in their apartment, losing contact here and there, and they are starting to get delusional and even entering the delusional disorder and entering into this schizoaffective disorder. Some students experience that. Recently, I haven't heard. Probably they get used to the condition, or they become even worse. I don't know about that, but this is what has uh, being um, uh, currently. Uh, what is this? I'm interested with the statement on we need to challenge people. Okay, okay. There is a question. I'm interested with the.
Yeah, there's another question as well above that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how you want to deal with these questions, James.
I only see the first one. Uh,
Okay, I
correct.
think one was directly sent to me. I'm sorry.
Oh,
There's
okay.
another one. So shall I read it? I think it was a
Sure.
mistake.
Yes.
It was
Yeah,
only sent to me.
absolutely. I think the second one is for Monty. It sounds like something, correct information sounds like
Yes.
one of your
Yeah.
terms. So Dexter and then Monty.
Okay, so I'll not read the person's name, but because it's related to his content, he says a major problem with virtual chat is that its permanence being recorded. It seems it cannot replace face-to-face. Will technology ever allow for anonymity? So that's why I'm not going to read the name. So it's what do you think about that? I'm not sure who's that for, James.
Yeah. As I think we all know, the three of us, we're old enough to remember when we went somewhere, we would check our mail when we got home. Uh, we weren't followed by constant contact and constant immersion in a lack of privacy. Um, I agree, it is disturbing at times, particularly when you're chatting casually. It's the same problem with Facebook. A colleague of mine tells me that Facebook is the place where you put things you used to say in your head but never say out loud. Um, so, yeah, this is just the reality of technology and the changes it's bringing to us.
Yep.
Monty or Dexter, do you have anything to say for the correct information question? It was.
To find the correct information, yeah, I think we have to be intelligent in selecting what is the right information and not right information. Besides in the internet, we call it like virtual police, security. They have to select which is the right information and the wrong information, and especially they have to ban all the information about racialism. Um, it's like there are lots of sites publishing porns. They can block it, so they can also block the racialism and so forth and hoax, and that is of course we cannot do it all by ourselves all at once, but we have to be very careful on selecting the right information and from the wrong information. Similarly, in the offline method, we need to be selective and in reading books, which is write books to read and not write books to read. It's the same thing.
Yeah, no, I just say briefly. I think there's two aspects which Monty mentions. The first is this idea of censorship, which you talked about before.
Yes.
And I completely agree, but I prefer, instead of censorship, I think because censorship has this idea of limiting freedom. And I see it as actually, this is not about freedom of speech. Okay, it's about stopping hate. So deliberate hate, deliberate lies. So I think hate speech is now like a crime in some countries, but not in others. And many people who support freedom of speech say no, that's our right. But I don't see it as freedom. I see freedom of speech as being freedom of expressing opinions or freedom of expressing disagreement and stuff, rather than spreading of deliberate hate or deliberate lies. So, I think there needs to be rules, especially in the media, and powerful people who have, the freedom or ability to speak to millions of people. I think there needs to be clear rules. In terms of choosing right thing, I think in my regular teaching, what I'm teaching students all the time is critical thinking. And I think one of the what has happened recently with COVID, but also with the last 4 years of a certain a certain leader, the whole idea of critically thinking about choosing the right information, being able that ability to decide if what is correct, what's not lies, what's deliberately trying to, like, propaganda, or deliberately trying to influence people. I think a lot of that is a much greater need now. It was always there as something, an important part of education, critical thinking, evaluation of political opinions and stuff. What's fact, what's opinion? But I think it's even more critical now to teach everybody, and it's another kind of what they call 21st century skills, that even without this sort of COVID thing, it's being promoted as important skill for the 21st century. But I think it's even more important now.
Well, it looks like we're out of time. There was one last
Yeah.
question on comparing online teaching to physical teaching. And while we don't really have time to go into it deeply, my only thought is that if you have a student who's hungry for knowledge and you can feed that hunger, the medium of instruction is less important. I teach in person, but it's the collaboration between a student and an instructor that makes for successful teaching.
I think I'll echo that.
Well, we are out of time, and I wish we had more time because I'm really enjoying this. But Monty
I
and
have to.
Dexter, it's wonderful to see you both, and thank
It's
you
great.
for your thoughts and your insights. And I pray to God I will see you guys next year, if not
Next year.
sooner, in Japan.
Hopefully.
Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you
Take
very
care.
much.
Thank you so much,
You
and thank
too.
you for
You
everyone
too.
for joining us. We'll be on a 10-minute break, and then we'll come back for the first session on aging. Thank you again. Take care now.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye.